Miss out, get 10% off your monthly premiums.
What would you do if you were in that position? Would you cut your arm off? Warren? Eh?
If it's a live or die kind of situation, Mike, I suppose you got to do what you got to do. But that is hectic. That is hectic.
True story. You want to see that at 127. Well, we're talking finances this morning, and luckily you don't have to give up an arm and a leg to do particularly well in life or to survive in life. That's why Warren is here. Now, Robert Kiyosaki says in his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, why is it that when people leave school and varsity, they still don't know how to manage money? One of the key aspects of life and survival. Warren, why do you say that's the case?
Well, Mike, just to follow on what we chatted about last week, just in terms of the whole fear, greed, hope, and ignorance component is to dig a little bit deeper. You know, why is it that people will still make irrational decisions when it comes to investing? And research in the States has actually come out to touch on two things. The first one is sort of investor illiteracy. So there's a lot of people that don't really understand the basic economics and the basic benefits of compound investment. And then the second one is the impatience aspect or the present bias, where we're dealing with the frontal cortex of your brain that takes over.
I want it all and I want it now.
Yes, and I don't want to wait until 20 years' time to see it. I want to experience it now.
So I want to challenge you on that, because Rich Dad, Poor Dad talks about living sort of meanly and in a bit of a crummy home, but building up huge wealth.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, but I'd rather have quality of life now,
yes,
a certain degree of,
yes,
and not wait until, you know, years to come and then spend my money or my riches. How do you react to that?
Well, I think that's where you need to plan your finances and your affairs, because that's really where it heads to. How do you then deal with the present bias in terms of how your brain reacts to decisions you've got to make? Is have a plan in place. Make sure that that goal, that long-term plan is smart. It must be specific, it must be measurable, it must be attainable, realistic, and to a timeline. And make sure, because that's the only way you're going to be able to measure your progress up to a point. So in a typical investment scenario, you need to have that emergency plan to deal with the unknowns, your medium-term plan to deal with the wants and the haves in the next 5 or 10 years, and then you need to have that typical retirement plan for the long term.
Fantastic. I want you to say that again. And I don't normally do this, but I like that. Smart. So it's got to be specific, and we're talking about goals now. Specific. It must be measurable. It must be achievable. Yes. It must be reachable.
Realistic.
Realistic, okay. Yeah. And there must be a timeline. Smart. Smart investing, smart goals. I like that, Warren. Awesome. Why is it, though, that we don't do that? Why don't we follow the obvious example of Warren Buffett and the guys that have gone before us?
Well, again, you know, it just comes back to the way we're wired. You know, if a retirement goal seems so far away and so unattainable, we actually avoid it. And as you say, we live in the here and the now rather than wanting to plan for the future. And that's just, they call it the lizard part of your brain, you know, that frontal cortex, which just aims back to wanting to not deal with the long-term consequences of our actions now. And as John Maxwell swears, you know, everything has a cause and effect type of principle. You do something now, there's going to be a consequence. So you need to just sit down, connect yourself with a certified financial planner and make sure that that person can guide you with wise counsel and accountability to make sure that you're living the lifestyle that you want to live, even though you want to live in a jalopy or live in a
as Warren Buffett does.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Warren Buffett is a classic example where he's living in a house that he's had since the 1960s, and he's got one of the biggest private airlines in the world, but he doesn't fly in those planes.
Warren, thank you once again. Always great to hear your insights.
It's a pleasure.
Fridays are good days for financial advice. After the break, we've got Hollywood A-list demands and some fantastic green chicken salad and aromatherapy. Lots more on Espresso.